Is America entering a post-Christian era? For over 2 centuries, America called itself a Christian nation. Churches on every corner, prayers in schools. In God we trust, printed on every dollar bill. But today, for the first time in American history, nearly 1 in 3 Americans claims no religion at all. What happened? Was this a slow, quiet drift? Or something much deeper? And here is the question that haunts historians, theologians, and everyday families alike. Is America, the nation that once sent missionaries across the globe, now entering a post-Christian era? Stay with me, because the answer is more complex, more surprising, and more human than you might expect. Welcome back to Salva, the channel where we explore history, faith, and the big questions that shape our world. If you're new here, this is a place of honest, respectful, and thoughtful conversation. No sensationalism, no mockery, just truth. Today, we're exploring one of the most discussed social transformations of our time, the quiet but unmistakable shift in America's religious identity. If this kind of content speaks to you, please hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss a journey like this one. And I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below. Do you think America is losing its faith or simply changing its relationship with it? Now, let's go back to the beginning. To understand where America is going, we must first understand where it came from. When the first European settlers arrived on the shores of North America in the 1600s, they came, many of them, in the name of God. The Pilgrims, the Puritans, the Catholics of Maryland. They carried their Bibles as carefully as they carried their tools. In 1776, when the Declaration of Independence was signed, nearly 98% of colonists identified as Protestant Christians, with the remaining being largely Catholic. The Founding Fathers themselves were a complex group, some Orthodox Christians, some deists, but nearly all of them believed that morality, governance, and faith were inseparable. John Adams, America's second president, wrote, "The Christian religion is, above all the religions that ever prevailed or existed in ancient or modern times, the religion of wisdom, virtue, equity, and humanity." And in 1954, just 70 years ago, the words "one nation, under God" were added to the Pledge of Allegiance. In 1956, "In God We Trust" became the official national motto, printed on every coin and every dollar bill. This was not a secular nation pretending to be religious. For most of its history, America was, without question, a deeply Christian society. But then, something began to change. The shift didn't happen overnight. It crept in, generation by generation, like a tide pulling slowly away from the shore. The first serious warning sign came in 1990. A landmark survey called the American Religious Identification Survey. The ARIs found that only 8.2% of Americans claimed no religion in 1990. By 2001, that number had jumped to 14.1%, a rise of over 40% in just 1 decade. They weren't. Researchers called this group then knowns, not nuns, but NONES. People who, when asked about their religion, simply answered, none. And here is a question worth pausing on. What made the 1990s so significant? What was it about that decade that loosened the ties of faith for millions of Americans? Tell me what you think in the comments below. Sociologists point to several forces converging at once. The end of the Cold War removed a powerful cultural glue, the idea that God-fearing America stood against godless Soviet communism. With that enemy gone, the social pressure to identify as Christian, to be a patriotic American, weakened. Then came the internet, the digital revolution. Suddenly, young Americans had access to an entire universe of ideas, philosophies, and worldviews beyond what their local church offered. And then, scandals. High-profile clergy scandals in multiple denominations shook the trust of millions for the first time in American history. Being religious began to carry social complications rather than social hordes. Now, let's look at the numbers, because the numbers tell a remarkable story. In 2007, the prestigious Pew Research Center found that 78% of Americans identified as Christian. By 2014, that number had dropped to 71%. And in their most recent landmark study, conducted across 7 months in 2023 and 2024, the Pew Research Center found that only 62% of Americans now identify as Christian. That is a 16 percentage point drop in less than 2 decades. To put that in human terms, tens of millions of people who once called themselves Christian no longer do. And what replaced faith? Today, 29% of Americans identify as religiously unaffiliated, atheist, agnostic, or simply nothing in particular. For the first time ever, this group of knowns now outnumbers Catholics, traditionally the single largest religious group in the country. Meanwhile, other faiths are growing. Buddhism has grown by 56% this decade, Judaism by 21%, Islam by 12%. Arise a Christian. America's religious landscape is not simply becoming less Christian, it is becoming more diverse, more fragmented, and in many ways, more searching. But who exactly is walking away? And why? The data reveals something sobering. 80% of Americans were raised Christian, but more than a quarter of them, 22% of all U.S. adults, no longer identify as Christian today. That means for every one person who converts to Christianity in America, 6 people leave it, for Catholicism specifically. That ratio is even more stark. 8.4 people leave for every one who joins the younger the generation, the more dramatic the departure. Generation Z, those born after 1997, are the least Christian generation in American history. Although Gen Zers generally identify as spiritual, Christianity doesn't seem to resonate as much as it did with previous generations, but the reasons are not simple. Researchers have identified several converging causes. First, politics. When Christianity became deeply associated with one political party, it alienated millions of Americans on the other side. Studies show 30% of people leaving religion cited being turned off by what they saw as negative treatment of the LGBTQ+ community in conservative churches. Second, higher education. Universities increasingly presented a secular worldview, and for many students, faith quietly receded in the face of new philosophies. Third, consumerism and individualism. Notre Dame sociologist Christian Smith argues that the rise of consumer culture made personal choice the supreme value, and traditional religion, with its communal obligations and moral demands, struggled to compete. Think about that for a moment. Could it be that the very freedom and prosperity that America built actually became one of the forces that weakened its faith? Share your thoughts below. Now, here is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Because just when scholars were predicting a straight, steep line downward, the decline appears to have stopped. At least for now. Pew Research Center's 2023 to 2024 study, their most comprehensive ever, found that the Christian share of the population has leveled off at around 62% Pew 1. The rapid rise of the religious knowns has also reached what appears to be a plateau. Some researchers believe this stabilization is temporary, a brief pause before the decline continues, driven by younger, less religious generations aging into adulthood. Others see something different. They see in this pause the first faint signals of a spiritual search, a generation that abandoned institutional religion, but has not abandoned the hunger for meaning. As one researcher noted, the fields may be emptied of formal religion, but the human need for the sacred has never disappeared. So the question becomes not whether Americans are religious, but what form that spirituality will take next. It is worth stepping back and placing this American story into a wider frame. Because while Christianity is declining in America and Western Europe, it is growing with extraordinary speed in other parts of the world. Sub-Saharan Africa, South Korea, Brazil, parts of Southeast Asia, The Global Christianity Report, published in early 2025, shows that the center of gravity of the Christian world has shifted dramatically from the North Atlantic to the global South. What America is experiencing, historically, is not the death of Christianity, but a geographical and cultural redistribution of it. And simultaneously, across the world, Islam remains the fastest-growing major religion, not only through birth rates, but through genuine conversion and spiritual searching. This is not a story of one faith rising while another falls. It is a story of humanity, in every era, in every land, wrestling with the eternal questions. Who am I? Why am I here? And to whom am I accountable? The implications of America's religious shift extend far beyond theology. Faith, historically, has been one of the great engines of American civil society. Hospitals, schools, food banks, community networks, much of it built and sustained by religious communities. As institutional religion weakens, researchers ask, what fills that space? Gallup data from 2020 revealed that for the first time in U.S. history, fewer than 50% of Americans belong to a church, synagogue, or mosque. Some sociologists warn of deeper social isolation, a loss of community, anchoring that religion once provided. Others argue that new forms of meaning-making are emerging in social movements, in wellness culture, in online communities, though whether these can substitute for the depth and continuity of religious tradition remains an open and urgent question. America is not simply becoming less Christian. It is becoming something it has never been before, a nation searching, in real time, for a new relationship between the individual and the sacred. What do you think will fill that space? Is America finding new meaning or losing something irreplaceable? Tell me in the comments. We began this journey in the colonial churches of New England. We walked through 2 centuries of faith shaping a nation. We watched the numbers shift, quietly at first, then unmistakably. And we arrived here, at a moment of profound transition, not just for America, but for all of us in every country, every culture, who are watching these changes and asking, what does it mean to be human, to seek truth, and to live with purpose? These are questions that do not expire. They are, in fact, the oldest questions we carry. If this journey gave you something to think about, please share this video with someone you respect. Subscribe to Salva if you haven't already, because here, we will keep exploring these great questions together, with honesty, with depth, and with respect for every sincere seeker of truth. Until next time, reflect, question, and never stop searching.